this right next to the speaker. So we'll eliminate all of the other.
Is it?
Here, hold this for a second. How are you?
Okay, I'm a little bit under the weather though. Not feeling up for it, you know?
Yeah.
Testing for the TV.
Good evening, good evening. I'm just announcing that the meeting is going to start in about 5 minutes, and we invite you all to stay. Thank you. Bye. a 1-minute warning. You're all invited to stay. We will begin in 1 minute. If you're staying, great. And if you're leaving, please leave quietly. If you are leaving, I want you to know that you can watch this meeting at home. We're being live streamed through Channel 17, the Channel 17 YouTube page, and the Old North End ONE Dinner Facebook page. Hello, hello. Good evening again. We're about to start. My name is Barbara McGrew. I'm one of the members of the Ward 2-3 Neighborhood Assembly Steering Committee. And at this time, I'd just like the other members of the committee to raise their hands. Thank you. So there's Amanda and Tony and Jim, and there are others. Infinite, where are you? Here. Okay. The first order of business is to thank again Janet Cascarton and her staff for this wonderful dinner. We are really blessed to have this event every month. I'm going to begin the meeting with NPA announcements. And I understand that Infinite has one.
Do you mind if I borrow this, Barbara? Hi, folks. I'm Infinite, and I've been on the steering committee for a while. I am slowly weaning myself off, and the last task, project that I'm going to be working on is to finalize our bylaws. Right now, wards 2 and 3 we have not finalized our bylaws, and for those of you who aren't familiar with bylaws, it's almost like our charter. The city has a charter, and NPAs have like a little kind of charter, and we use that to sort of come up with our general operating procedures, and like trying to figure out how we're gonna budget and stuff like that. And Tony that's right, Tony, the great one. Tony Reddington and I are working on them together. Our processes, we're looking at all of the other wards, 1 through 8, to see what their bylaws look like. And then we're going to sort of borrow what makes sense from those bylaws, and then come up with and customize our own bylaws for wards 2 and 3. And so we're inviting folks, if you're interested in some of the dry, non-controversial stuff, to join us in coming up with some new bylaws. Just reach out and let us know, and we'll figure out. We want to meet maybe at least once a month. We can do a lot online through shared documents, and hopefully we'll be done by, what do you think, March maybe? Tony, you think? Yeah, that's all I have. And next up is Tony Reddington.
Now it is. Yes? Before I introduce Tony, I forgot to say that we have several roles assigned to different people tonight. And Tony, who's going to speak soon, and Andrew Champagne are going to be running the mics to you. So when you're recognized, somebody will come to you with one of these beautiful, colorful mics. Amanda Hannaford is going to be the timekeeper, so we can stick to the schedule that we have. And James Lockridge is running the camera. But the next, and he has actually the next announcement, which is the financial report.
This is a tiny, tiny little financial report. It's our first financial report. I'll tell you that we're starting the year with the expectation that the city will provide $400 in funding to the NPA like they did last year. But at the same time, you were here for the June meeting. You'll hear a report about what came out of that tonight. And we have a long list of ways that we could utilize some funding to improve the NPA experience and reach out to more people. So as we go forward, I hope to have more to report at each meeting about expanding capacity for accomplishing what we all decide we'd like to. So thank you.
Thank you, James. And next is Tony Reddington, who will report on the Winooski Corridor Ward representation issue.
Yeah, hi, Tony Reddington. I'm going to shift this over to Jacob Flanagan to give you an on-the-spot report on the progress so far on the various meetings which you've seen. And I'll just say, most important, you have before you some little slips of paper where you can express your concerns and what you'd like to see on the Winooski Corridor. We will pick those up at the end of the meeting. You can leave them on your table. Brian Davis from the study will also speak probably briefly during the forum. But Jacob, you're host.
Thank you. Okay, here we go, guys. Winooski Ave. What are we talking about? Corridor study. Okay, so the city went through Plan BTV, Complete Streets. We have all these plans, and we're looking to actually implement them. So the city and the Chittenden County Regional Planning have selected Winooski Ave to look at it and to get more engagement with all y'all to figure out what exactly we're going to do with this street if we want to do anything at all, which we probably do. So the first public meeting just happened, and it talked about the existing conditions of Winooski Ave and what kind of vision do we want for this street, and this street being all the way from the very tippity top to the very bottom. So there is a beautiful website for this, and you'll notice there's cards on a lot of these tables. It says Winooski Ave Corridor Study, so you can find that website. Just take that card home with you. I've got extras if you need it. And look at that website, and if you're interested in what those existing conditions are, there's the meeting notes right there. There's a presentation right there, all that information if you want it. The next meeting is going to happen sometime fall, winter. We don't have an exact date yet. Certainly it will be posted to that website, and I'll try to also announce it so you all can participate if you want to. And that next meeting is about making, it's called Alternatives Development. So I'm guessing that's kind of be, what exact things are we going to do? And maybe Brian can touch upon that a little bit more in just a second. So yeah, that's about it. That's all I got. But if you've got more questions, you want to get involved, you talk to me. Myself and Alyssa are this neighborhood's representatives, and also Tony is big involved in all this. And then Brian over here is leading the charge in a lot of this. Brian, you want to talk a little bit?
I'll come up in the front, might be easier to hear and see. My assistant is welcome to come up too. Hi everyone, thanks for having me. My name is Brian Davis. I'm a transportation planner at the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. It's kind of long, but there you go. This is my assistant Mirabelle. First of all, thank you very much for the dinner. That was excellent. Thanks for the volunteers for that. We are working with the city, as Jacob mentioned, to re-envision Winooski Avenue. They have the plans. We're trying to come up with the actual things that the city council will ultimately approve and then put in the capital plan and have funding for. So with this part, what we're doing is getting public feedback from those who live in the neighborhood This is your, this is a different main street for the city. We want to know what you like about it. What don't you like about it? If you had a magic wand, what would you change? Jacob mentioned I put some of those little postcards on there. It has the website URL on there. It has my name and number on there, a brief description. I also put a short little survey on there. You can fill those out. I'm going to try to stick around as long as I can. You can give those to me. Tony also volunteered to take those as well. Again, my contact info is on there. Go home and email me or call me. What am I missing? There is a map, right. So public meetings are hard to go to. Not everyone can go to a meeting in the evening. So we developed this map that's online. There's a link on the website. You can pull up the map. You can drop a little pin and write your comment in there. You can do that as often as you like. I like that there's a bike rack in front of Radio Bean. I don't like that it's one way. Whatever you want, tell us. I don't know what you want. I know what I want, but I want to hear from you. And just so you know, I'm a couple streets over. I'm in Ward 1, so it's my neighborhood too. And she's a student at SA, so we're local. So again, I value your time. I value your input. At this, what we're going to do after all the public comments are accepted, we're going to keep that open through September. And then the consultant team will develop a whole range of alternatives. Everything from here to here. We'll come back in sometime late fall, early winter and show those to everyone. And you can say, yep, I like that one. That one's terrible. That one's okay. I like that part. And then we'll refine those and start narrowing it down. Ultimately, we'll have 6 alternatives that will go towards the end of the process. And hopefully it's something that we all agree on. So thank you again. My contact info is on all that information. I'm here to serve you. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Brian.
May I ask a question? Oh, I'm behind you. To your right. Now totally behind you. Sorry about that. Is for the comments, will those be posted on a website or anything? Will they be available or tracked anyway? Because that's just one of the things. There's not often, I think people feel there's not a lot of transparency.
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. I want to say yes, and I'm trying to think of the best way to do that because we're getting it in so many forms. I think what will happen is the consultant team will sort of, while it may not all be verbatim, we're going to try to capture all the themes that we hear, whether it's about on-street parking or bike connectivity and direction of traffic flow and so on. We're also doing some stakeholder interviews with local businesses and residents, again, sort of this kind of process. Different advocacy groups, and I can make those available online just so you can get a sense of what those groups are saying to us. So we will find a way to let that be known. If you were unable to attend the public meeting last week, we had sort of these big maps that people put dots on in comments. We took photos of those. I did put those on the website. You can click it. It's a PDF that pops open. The whole meeting was filmed. You can click on that link and watch it. Thank you to Channel 17 for filming that. That's available too, so it's almost like you were there.
Thank you. Okay, we have slipped quietly from NPA announcements to public forum. Are you making another announcement, Tony, about the Winooski? Oh, okay. So the public forum is now open, and that's something we have at the beginning of every meeting, so you can be heard. Announcements, issues you would like us to raise in the future, questions you may have. Okay, but anyway, Tony has the mic.
Tony? I'm not sure.
Hi, I just have a announcement. I want to let people know I went to the CSWD meeting yesterday. That's the Chittenden Solid Waste District. If you don't know, they do all the trash recycling. And they had a board meeting they do every month. And I went because they're closing all the reuse zones in all the county, which I think is a hugely underutilized resource that we've had, where you can drop off stuff you don't want and pick it up. And it's in a shed protected from the weather, so it's not sitting out in your green space. So I think that's a huge community resource, but they're closing them all. So I went to the meeting, I spoke sort of against it, and as well as the one of the select board members from Richmond, because this is actually a huge issue in Richmond. And so they actually had a petition in Richmond, and they were really upset, and particularly Richmond. They held a vote to reopen that process and work with cities to make it work. I don't have time. I'm not going to bore you with all the reasons why they wanted to close it and everything, but they said, well, let's take another look at it with each of the cities, and it seemed like it would pass, but then they sort of like, well, what about those other reasons we had? But they took a vote, and most of the representatives were for it, but since the votes are weighted by population of the city, and our Burlington rep voted against reopening them, it failed. But it was close because a lot of them were like, yeah, let's talk about it. Clearly, the public isn't aware that these are closing. Like, let's open that process back up. And so it almost seemed like it was going to pass, but then there were a few people who weren't into it. So that was really disappointing. But the upside is they have some grants for if people who have ideas for reuse and recycling kind of projects, small projects in the communities. And I have some ideas that I'd like to work on. So the main reasons were that there were hazardous items left in the reuse zone. Needles, prescription drugs, ammunitions, fertilizers. But one of the problems then, the response to that was that there are no like guidelines posted about what should and shouldn't be there. And everyone who sort of spoke against their reasons was saying you can have volunteers come and sort of keep it cleaned up. That seems like kind of an obvious solution, I would think, because I know there's a lot of towns where it works really well. And another big objection that we had to it was that, they said that this decision was based on looking 25, 30 years out, and they're like, we're not going to have enough space in the drop-off zone. Like, there's too much traffic coming in. This takes up too much space. But our argument was, looking 25, 30 years out, you want to increase the amount of reuse. You don't want to say, oh, we're not going to do reuse. We'll just leave that to, Restore or like Craigslist. Companies can figure it out. They sort of want to like privatize it. Like, we don't want to have to deal with that. So we are arguing they should increase the effort and energy into that. Anyway, they voted no. But talk to me if you're interested in working on like, I have ideas for like a smaller reuse zone, like sort of all over, kind of like the little free library, but for stuff. They have those in Montreal where you have like toys and games right on the street. I think that's great. It'd be a great model, and it'd be perfect for their grants of like $5,000. So I'm going to apply for that. Talk to me if you want to help out.
Thank you very much. Before you sit down, is there any action you would like the NPA to consider in future meetings?
I can't think of anything off the
Okay,
top
if
of my
there's
head.
anything you want us to do, let one of the steerers know, okay?
Sure. They close in a week on the 29th of this month, so this was sort of the last chance to step in, I think.
Thank you very much. Tony?
Okay, we are trying to hold this to a minute, which is not easy. Two couple things. First, want to mention Alyssa Faber, who is also the other person who's involved with the Winooski corridor study, along with Jacob Flanagan. She needs to be, either she or Jacob or both have been at every single meeting to this time. I'm just going to briefly mention something that very few people know about. It's already in place. It will not change, and it's a decision of the Department of Public Works and on North Avenue. There's going to be a traffic light at the entry to Cambrian Rise with 4,500 cars going in and out of that project as it's finally completed. There was a real effort, and I want to give all credit to Eric Farrell, who's a developer who's been very cooperative and very supportive, and he will be reporting here briefly either next month or in November. And I want to say that he's a terrific guy. A lot of the problems that have been developed have not been because of him, but because of a Department of Public Works who's not been very cooperative. Specifically, you're going to have a new traffic signal there. It's going to generate 2 to 3 injuries a year. There's already been one multiple car crash with injuries that has occurred since they've begun construction on the family project. We got the top guy in the world to determine a roundabout which would cut injuries to 1 every 2 or 3 years rather than 2 or 3 a year, but the Public Works city engineer rejected it, and both Mayor Weinberger and the Director of Public Works, Chapin Spencer, refused at this point to override that. It's a very sad setback for our ward, for our neighborhood, And but at least you now know there's a why you've got what's happening on North Avenue occurring.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any quick questions for Tony? Seeing none, I will, do I see one? No. Seeing none, I'll move on. Any other comments, questions for the open public forum?
Hello.
Over there, hello. Just say your name and what you want to talk about.
Hi, my name is Zachary York, and I'm running for county assistant judge. And I don't know if many people know what a county assistant judge is. Anybody? People have heard me speak before, maybe? Okay. It is a judge. It is a layperson judge that represents you in the judiciary. You haven't heard of them because they don't really go out much. But every 4 years, every county elects 2 assistant judges. They represent you in the judiciary. They're layperson judges. They're intended to be your voice in the judiciary. They're intended to bring a local perspective to the judiciary. And I've worked for the state for a while now. I work in the court right now. I'm a court clerk. And I was nominated by the Progressive Party to be their nominee for county assistant judge. And if you have any questions about what this job is or who I am, because I'm sure you don't know much about it or me at all, please let me know. I graduated with a bachelor's in legal and justice studies from the old Burlington College. I got a certificate of paralegal studies, and I have been a court clerk for the past few years. I do the civil motions docket over on Main Street. So if you have any questions, please. Zachary York, Progressive candidate for county assistant judge.
Thank you, Zachary. And over here.
Side judge.
How about that? There we go. Okay. I'm going to start off with my own appreciation of that fantastic meal. I am so full, but so grateful for all of the volunteers and sponsors of that delicious meal. My name is Caitlin Ellerman. I'm a resident of Ward 2, and I'm here tonight with Emily Rowland and Hunter Grosvenor, neighbors to downtown and the South End. And we wanted to just quickly introduce ourselves to each NPA this month. We are, as you may have heard, or you may be well aware of, there is an organization, a campaign getting started in Burlington called Ready for 100. It is associated with Sierra Club, and the focus is on transitioning our city to 100% renewable energy in a just, equitable, and inclusive manner in all 3 sectors. So we've made a lot of progress in electricity here in Burlington. There's probably improvements to be made there. There's a lot of improvements to be made in transportation and in heating, and we're excited to be sort of intersecting with the Winooski Ave study, which is definitely in line with this transition and this need. So what the 3 of us are focusing on is a little bit of an offshoot that's going to focus on our city council and sort of our policy process. So our hope is that we can sort of familiarize residents with this concept and start a process that will eventually lead to a meaningful city council resolution in support of this transition. So we obviously want the support of the city behind us, and we want a strong element of citizen participation, some kind of advisory committee that will sort of help guide the process and ensure that all of the neighborhoods are included and that all voices are a part of the process and are equally benefited by the transition. So we are going to put a email list sheet up there, but really the goal of tonight was to introduce this, and hopefully we'll be back in the next few months to do something a little more substantive.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments, Charlie? We're trying to hold the comments to about 1 minute if you can, okay?
Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Charlie Messing, and I have this blurry microphone figured out. You talk too loud from further away. Okay, so it's it's important to keep the reuse things open. What probably happened is somebody went in there one day and found something they didn't like, and somebody else said, okay, well, maybe we'll close them all. I mean, we should keep them open, and we should make sure, because that is important. As far as Winooski Avenue, I think we should make sure that they don't cut down a whole bunch of trees to do whatever they're doing, because the city has a habit of widening the sidewalk, and a couple trees go and a couple dozen trees go. So let's have more trees instead of less. I think people have to talk to each other. Social media is one thing, but if you can't talk to somebody face to face, we can't get a thing going. We have to like each other. We have to trust each other. We have to be tolerant, and we don't all think the same thing, but we're all together. The fourth thing is who runs the city. Okay, do we work for the mayor and the council and or do they work for us? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else? Yes, Albert.
Hi, my name is Albert Petrarca, and I'm with a group called the Off the Wall Coalition. And as people are probably aware, in the year since Charlottesville, cities all over this country have been putting new eyes on statues, artwork, memorials in their public squares, and they have been removing them. There was a task force recently created, and that task force came to the same conclusion that the Marketplace mural on Leahy Way in our town square is a racist artwork and that it has to come down. The only issue is that the mural task force says that it has to come down no later than August of 2022. But there's no reason, according to the task force's chairperson, that that mural can't come down next week. So we have the mayor arguing to keep this mural up for another 4 years in our town square to satisfy the financial investments of the people, the businesses on Church Street. So on September 24th, a week from Monday, council is going to vote on bringing this mural down. And our argument is that if something is racist, you resist it. You don't bargain with it. So we're calling on everyone to come to City Council on the 24th, and we're hoping that since the media has announced that it'll be on the 24th, one of the things we're concerned about is that this mayor will get someone on his side to fast forward it to next Monday so that the public can't participate. So who's ever here from City Council, we would hope that you would resist that little sneaky maneuver by the mayor to move it up so that the public can't participate. But we're asking everyone to come and demand that that mural come down ASAP, and we not impose racism on our communities of color for another 4 years to satisfy the Lunigs, the Marriott Inn, and people like that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Albert. We have time to take one more comment if there is one.
I was going to say, and let's keep it down to 1 minute if you can.
Back there?
We've gone way overboard.
Actually, I'll take two. So we'll start back there, and then I'll recognize Jimmy, and that will be it. Yes. Oh, she needs a mic.
Where are you?
Hi, I'm Joy, and I apologize, I've been kind of out of the loop. I was just wondering if someone could possibly direct me to the decision-making and the budgetary decisions that were to put all of those planters in place that are on our streets today. So if anyone knows anything about the history of that and why it's there and how much it cost and what the future plans are, I would really appreciate you letting me know.
Okay, hopefully somebody will get to you. Does anybody
Thank
in
you.
the room know? Okay, somebody hopefully will get to you.
All that work is being done by the Department of Public Works. Nicole Loesch is the one to contact, and they have been regularly, and they have actually brought their program here once before. So it's Nicole Loesch, Department of Public Works.
Thank you, Tony. And Jimmy, you have something to say? Oh, okay. Each of you try to hold it to a minute, please, okay? Okay. Thank you. Push the thing up. That's it.
Yeah, this is just to keep the park green. If anyone hasn't signed our petition in this regard, please see me or Donna. I think Donna's still here, is she? Maybe she's not.
And Donna's on the agenda as well.
Oh, she is?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, just see one of us, and we would be more than happy to get your signature so we can keep that park lovely and full of green.
Thank you. Jimmy?
So, in a wonderful exercise of the Vermont constitutional provision
Just
for...
say who you are first.
My name is Jimmy Lease.
Thank you.
So, the voters at town meeting approved the resolution to cancel the F-35. And that was March 6th. Within 2 weeks, the City Council of Burlington approved its own resolution to cancel and replace the F-35. And so did the town's city councils of Winooski and South Burlington. So now there's just one person who's not quite on board, and that is the person who's most responsible for managing the airport, and that's our mayor, Mayor Weinberger. So I'd like to ask that everyone, when you see the mayor, encourage him to consider that the Air Force says that 1,200 children are subjected to learning impairment from noise at that level. That's unacceptable. We don't need our children having learning impairment. And it's his job as mayor, his first and primary job, is to protect the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, obviously I'm not seeing hands. Have I missed anybody?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ryan Doyle. This is my first meeting. It's really awesome to see how many people come out for these things. I'm a half-time Burlingtonian at the moment, and I feel very feisty about things like parking and curb cuts in neighborhoods and other pieces of infrastructure. So if you also feel kind of feisty about those issues, please come find me. I'd like to talk to you and find my other people in here who want to kind of work on those projects and actually drive solutions on them. So Ryan Doyle, find me here on Facebook. I want to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is that it? Going once, going twice. I let this one over because to me, this is the most important part of the meeting, which is hearing from you. So thank you for all your participation. And now we have city council reports. Who is here from the city council? Jane, I didn't see you. Come on up. Okay, I don't know what Brian looks like. I'm ashamed to say. Right. And Max is not here? Okay. Max Tracy is away. Okay, so that gives you all a little more time.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome back from a long, hot summer. I wanted to talk about what I know about the mural task force, and we had scheduled some kind of resolution for the September 24th meeting. And we didn't want to let the report just lie there for a long period of time without us taking any action on it, because I think it would be wrong just to like table it and then move on and not do anything. So as far as I know, there will be a resolution on the 24th, and it'll be on, you know, on board docs the Thursday before for people to see it. Yes. Oh, sorry, Jane Nodell Central District, which is, thank you, Patrick, wards 2 and 3 together. The planters are kind of an experiment in traffic calming and creating, I think, streets that work well for pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like the planters. I've heard a lot of people say they like the planters. I do think the planters require people in cars to change the way they drive. And so there is, I think, some adaptation that's required to make it work. But they were created to be kind of temporary. So you'll note that it's, you know, not permanent materials. So I think they want to hear, if they genuinely want to hear from people, and they're going to evaluate whether to keep them going. I do think for the area around, like on Loomis is also a greenway, which is a bikeway. So they created, as part of the walk bike master plan, there are bike pathways through the city, and this one is an east-west path that gets you from North Prospect down to Battery Street without going on North Street or Pearl Street, neither of which are very good streets for bikes. And so that's part of all the markings that you're seeing on Loomis are part of that little neighborhood bike pathway. Okay. And I don't know how much money we spent. So the Old North End councilors have organized some neighborhood cleanups. We had one at the beginning of the summer where we used city council initiative funds to get a bunch of dumpsters. And we say to people, bring the stuff you've been wanting to get rid of. Some goes in the trash, some goes in recycling, some goes to the reuse zone, although we're going to figure something else out for the reuse items. So we're having another one on Saturday, October 13th. And we'll put out information, but it's a good way to dispose of things at the city's expense. North Winooski, the Winooski Avenue Corridor Study, I'm a council rep that's on it. I think probably Tony talked about it earlier. And at our next meeting, which will be sometime in November, we'll get some street options that people can actually start to look at. I think the first meeting last week talked a lot about the stretch between Pearl Street and Main Street, which is probably everyone can agree is the worst segment of Winooski Avenue.
Thank you, Jane. Is there something else?
I just wanted to add that I have asked the new CEDO director, the interim CEDO director, Neil Lunderville, the Old North End councilors have asked for an updated jobs and people study, and that is in this year's budget, which is very important. Economic development is not real estate development. It's about good jobs for people who need good jobs and improved employment opportunities. So we've got to know this will give us this idea of where we are today so we can develop strategies for how we can improve.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Barbara.
Any questions for Jane? Okay, before Brian Pine speaks, I just want to announce that there will be a raffle at the end of when the state representatives speak, and if you haven't gotten your name in, there's still time. Brian, hi, I'm Barbara.
Thanks. Jane and I tried to make sure we weren't redundant here, so I'll try to touch on two things that are coming up for the council and that I think are hopefully of great interest. One is how the city protects the lake from continued both unintentional acts that result in more pollution in our lake. The discharges that have happened are really unacceptable. No one is proud to say we have them. We know more today about what we're doing to the lake than we did even 10 years ago, and this pollution of our lake from our city and others has been actually ongoing for far too long, and Burlington is about to bite the bullet by bringing to the voters in November a question to make investments, important infrastructure improvements to the stormwater and the wastewater treatment system to the tune of $30 million, and the way that gets repaid is by ratepayers. So think of taxpayers and ratepayers. They're actually different entities, and the reason why is because UVM and the hospital don't pay taxes, but they pay big rates. They pay a lot of water bills. So I'm trying to institute more progressivity into the pricing of the water rate so that homeowners who don't use a ton of water aren't paying the same rate as the institutions who don't pay taxes. I believe they should actually shoulder a little more proportion of the burden. So we're trying to make sure that as we move forward, we make this investment and we protect homeowners and renters who don't have that elasticity in their budget that larger institutions do. The other thing, of course, is the $70 million bond that our school board unanimously approved putting toward the city council. So the way this works is the school board's in charge of identifying the capital needs of the school system, and then in order to get the funding, they have one source, only one way to do it, and that's to go to the property taxpayer, to the voters and ask for the property tax to be raised to use the new revenue to pay back a bond. And so the $70 million is a bond that would be taken out, issued by the city to fund a significant renovation, the first renovation ever to the high school of any significance. And I believe that our high school is one of our most important investments, our schools, not just symbolically, but it's part of what really sends a message to our future generation that we really believe in them, we honor their hopes, their dreams, and their aspirations, and we want them to have a first-class, 21st century learning environment. And right now, they're really stuck in the 70s or 60s even in terms of that building. It's so antiquated. It's both my boys just went through the high school, and I can tell you, it's actually sad and embarrassing to walk through that building and to see the kids whose day is basically ruined by the fact that they have a physical limitation and can't get from one building to the next in a timely manner. And so they have to make lots of accommodations for kids. Some kids end up with health problems because of it. It causes lots of anxiety. There's all kinds of reasons why this is completely unacceptable, I think, for our great city. A great city needs a great high school, and we don't have one now. So those are my main updates.
Brian, I have a question, and I know you're not on the school board, but I was just wondering what consideration has been given to having a new high school instead of piecemealing one for $70 million or so. What about if we spent $100 million and got a state-of-the-art high school?
I think that's a great point, because it's been looked at as really in detail is, can we just knock this thing down and either there or somewhere else build a new facility for not a whole lot more? And the reality is we have a really excellent auditorium and actually an excellent gymnasium, and we have a bunch of excellent facilities surrounded by complete dilapidation and inaccessible spaces. So the idea is to build around those new structures and preserve the existing. And people might know about the notion of embodied energy. Like, this building has lots of embodied energy in the bricks that were made to build this building. At a time, each brick took a gallon of gasoline to make in this building. So it's just an example of the amount of energy that goes into buildings. So when we knock them down, we're actually really wasting resources, and our high school doesn't need to fully come down. So they've looked at that issue and decided the most cost-effective way. On a cost per square foot, which is really what the math that you have to do, it's about $250 a foot. And for this type of building, the architects, all the people in the industry say that's actually a really appropriate, fair price for getting this type of building. So it's not a gilded lily. Some people think it's this is too expensive. It may be a big price tag, but we don't really have the option of doing it. We can't do it cheaper. I don't think there's a way to do it cheaper, for sure. Patrick.
So we're constantly, it seems like constantly every voting cycle.
Could somebody give Patrick a microphone, please?
Oh, use your outside voice.
Posterity, okay. It seems like I see a lot of bond issues every voting cycle. What I don't see is how much debt the city incurs, how much debt we've accumulated over the past X amount of time, what our bond rating is by this debt. Is our debt proportional to other cities? So we're not just voting on something, hey, I'm all in support of a new stormwater runoff system for the lake. I'm in support of a lot of things, but you need to have a little bit more perspective about it's such a huge sum of money, it's hard to grasp.
Yeah.
It needs for at least the voters to say, well, this is what it's going to cost you over this many years. And I haven't, I haven't done much digging, I have to admit, but I haven't seen a comprehensive financial evaluation on our long-term sustainability with a new bond issue. I remember the mayor didn't want to bring up this school bond issue during the March election because it was a very sensitive and maybe perhaps volatile issue. And that things are proposed at times and they're strategic. And I feel like it probably wouldn't be as strategic if we had a long-term scale of what we're spending, what we have to look forward to spend on. Nothing complicated, no bean counter arithmetic of logarithms and stuff. Just a simple accounting for those of us who are just simple voters.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a really important point, because I think the only way we're going to build consensus as a community if we're fully open and transparent and really say, this is what it costs, this is our debt we've already have on the books, which, by the way, is in that annual report that you get when you go to vote on town meeting day, but you have to really know where to look, so it's not that accessible. This needs to be presented, I think, in a way that the public can easily digest what's already on the books for debt and what would be the effect of additional debt. And right now we know that if this full amount of bond capacity is if the city goes out for the full 70 million, that it would be about a $340 increase on a house valued at $250,000. So that's what we do know now, and that's an annual amount. So that's right, not for someone who's not income sensitized. So if you pay your education bill based on your income because you're below 90-ish or 100, somewhere around 90 or 100, it's based on household size. So I'm getting into way too much detail, but yeah. We'll have much more opportunity to talk about this. The vote is, 2 months from now. Yeah.
Tony, somebody's coming with a mic for you.
Hi. I've got an iPhone here. I've got an iPhone iWatch here. I watched the Apple presentation a couple days ago on the new phones. The problem I have is, you mentioned, Brian, that the cost of this school is pretty reasonable per square foot. But the picture that I get of that school on the tweet picture that I have is sort of like early correctional. That it's one of the most ugliest buildings I've ever seen. And Burlington, for some reason, lost its architectural mojo back about 1929. It lost its and its voice. Its architectural mojo in 1929 with the Memorial Auditorium and City Hall. There must be some way to make that building look attractive so we could be proud of it. The way it looks now is discouraging. We should be doing quality buildings, at least quality design, and maybe quality inside, but it sure isn't quality on the outside.
Thanks, Tony.
I'm the facilitator. I can't weigh in. Thank you, Brian. Okay, is Jill here? Here she is. And is Celine here? Celine is not, okay.
Yeah, we got three of the four here. All right. Since I got up here first, I guess I'll start and then I can pass it along. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Sorry, it's been a long day. I've been out painting and I'm like completely pooped. So I'm Representative Jill Krowinski. I represent the Old North End and downtown with Kurt McCormick. And one of the things I wanted to share with you tonight is the work that's being done with the EPA in town. How many of you got a flyer at your house about the EPA doing testing in our neighborhood? Okay, so a handful of you. So in July, there was a property transfer happening on Elmwood Avenue. And during that time, they were testing the soil as part of the property transfer, and it had some chemicals in the soil sample called PERC, which is toxic chemicals, carcinogens, that are related to dry cleaners. And we all know, for us in the neighborhood, there is a dry cleaning facility on Elmwood Avenue. So when the state got those test results, they called the EPA to ask them to come in and to help do some samples at the school and around our neighborhood from La Fountain, Elmwood, Intervale, Spring Street, Walnut, and a couple other streets to get a sense of how far this chemical has spread throughout the ground and maybe air. So the EPA has been in town twice, and the good news is that IAA was tested and is safe. So for those of you who have children there, you know that. But what we're seeing is that the contaminated soil seems to be more centrally located towards Elmwood Avenue, in particular the northern area. So I live on Spring Street, and my house was part of the homes tested in that area. And the water's been safe, the air is safe, there is trace amounts in the soil that are okay health-wise, but it's something to know. So the EPA will be back in town to do another round of tests in the next 2 weeks to further sort of limit the impact zone and understand if we need to do any type of mitigating work to make sure that our homes and our streets are safe for everyone. So I have, I can email folks if you don't have access to them, handouts that have been made available from the state that talk about the chemicals and talk about the steps being taken with the EPA. So I would be happy to email those to you. I did send them out on Front Porch Forum a couple weeks ago, and they're also on my website. But if you want hard copies too, I'm more than happy to get those to you. So that's the update on the EPA front. Does anyone have any questions about it? Great. Okay.
Thank you, Celine. Oh, do you have more?
Well, we're not in session right now, so right now we're really just out there talking with all of you to hear what your thoughts and concerns are and what you want us to focus on next legislative session. So I would just say we've been having some great meetings around water quality this week. I'm going to continue my work on paid family leave and minimum wage, and I'd just like to hear what your thoughts are. And Kurt and I will be knocking on doors and holding coffee hours, so we're looking forward to getting your thoughts and feedback.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I'm Kurt McCormick, and I've jotted down just a few things that I plan to work on. You've heard them all before, but we're not in session now. But we really can raise the minimum wage substantially in Vermont. The House and Senate passed a bill that raised the minimum wage to $15 in 6 years. The bill I had introduced was the same thing, only 5 years, and that bill had 50 sponsors. I'm really glad to hear Brian's proposal on the UVM Board of Trustees, and I agree with it on the water rates. Hope certain people didn't hear me say that. In general, I don't think we are working well with municipalities, frankly, like we used to, and I think we need to do that. And this is one area. And Brian and I go way back, and getting combined sewer overflow money into Burlington and Rutland and other places when the federal government was slashing their share from 70% to 35% in half. And I don't know what it is now, but there should be a state program to get in the middle of all that and get those things done. I think the same thing, Brian, for bicycle infrastructure. We still have a bicycle program at the state, but it's small off-road bike paths, which are wonderful. I love them, but in places like Burlington, what we need is better infrastructure, on-street infrastructure, and the state needs to help pay and help make those happen, not just off-road bike paths. Amtrak is coming. We have Amtrak to Essex Junction and then up to St. Albans. We'll get the Ethan Allen Express to Burlington in now 3 years. It would have been 2 years, but there was a lot of work with the tunnels that go right through the village of Middlebury, right underneath the green there. So that's been the holdup. But if you're down there this summer, you'll see that they're working on it, and it looks like 3 years now. And when that train gets to Burlington, it'll be 2.5 hours faster to New York City than the train at Essex, the Vermonter, which is car competitive. Oh yeah, that train goes to Rutland now, and it's gonna stop in Rutland and then keep going, with at least a stop in Middlebury, maybe Virgins. Everybody wants a stop. Amtrak tries to have not so many stops because they make the train a little bit later each time. Nope, not that one. Someday the other one from Essex Junction should go back up to, no, that's the Vermonter. and that used to be called the Montrealer. Now it's called the Vermonter. And we also could have an AM bus, but ultimately we want to have that train continue all the way up to Montreal. Okay, I want to just say that I will be reintroducing a bill I introduced a long time ago with a Republican sponsor on local income taxes for education, to get off property taxes altogether. You can see we've been moving that way, however slowly, and we need to just do that and stop funding education with the property tax. This program would be administered by the state, but the tax would be local. Brian, the income sensitivity right now is all the way to 115,000. Yeah, so that's again one of the baby steps towards what I'm talking about. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Chena. I'm a state representative for Chittenden 6-4. I do live in Ward 2 over on Isham Street. I see some neighbors here. My district mate, Selena Colburn, couldn't make it tonight because she's not feeling well, but she's hoping to make it next month. So we aren't in session right now. So I can't give you an update on the latest legislative action because everybody's campaigning right now. I would encourage everyone to if you haven't already, to educate yourself on our statewide candidates and to get engaged in the election. One idea I have for the future that I thought I would talk about, since now is the time to be creative, and excuse me because I'm sick too. I think everyone's catching this like fall cold thing, or hopefully it's not the EPA thing, but but speaking of the EPA, we're facing environmental crisis where our waterways and our water's contaminated. Our climate is changing because we continue to contaminate our atmosphere with the products of industry, as well as now like Tundra is releasing methane. We're releasing record amounts of waste into the environment. Microplastics are polluting our environment. We have an economy that's been built to extract from the environment what is needed to make money for the few, and then the waste is put back out there and it affects all the rest of us and our whole world. And so we have environmental issues, and then we hear from people not just in Chittenden County but around the state that there's economic issues. People are working longer hours and making less money. People are having trouble finding work. There's small towns struggling all over our state. And there hasn't really been a long-term vision that looks at how do we build our economy in a sustainable way, just lots of little stopgap solutions. And so an idea I had last session that didn't get much action, but there seems to be a little more interest this time around, is the idea of turning Vermont into a model of a zero-waste economy. And so the idea is that there would be a zero-waste economy study, and this study would do an assessment with various partners. I'm not going to list them all to you now because I want to keep this relatively brief. But things like solid waste districts, chambers of commerce, for example, etc. Do an assessment of the entire state, look at what is working around our state with the economy, and what are the natural resources that we're using, and also look at what is the waste that we're producing. And how can that waste become the source of something else? Because if we could fill in those holes around the state with businesses that use our waste to become their source product, and then design it so that there's circular manufacturing in communities, for example, where all of the waste of a community is being reused, then we can create more jobs, we can solve some of our greatest environmental problems, because in a zero waste economy, we would find a use for the carbon that we're releasing, and phosphorus wouldn't end up in our waterways. We would capture that phosphorus before. So those are some examples, but one of the things I'm going to be advocating for in this next session, if I live until then and make it in, is for us to look at becoming a zero-waste economy. So I thought I'd just put that idea out there for you now to think about, and I'd be happy to talk more over time with you about this idea. So that's sort of an optimistic idea. The other thing, another issue I think that we should all be paying attention to is campaign finance reform. We have a governor who's running for re-election who's accepting money from pharmaceutical companies, and then on the other hand, saying he's going to do something about the opiate crisis. And so, that's just one example of the many ways that our elected officials get influenced by money from corporations and from special interest groups. And I really think we need to be more serious about changing that and getting money out of politics. So, thank you.
Very much. Any questions? Albert?
Yes, I'd like to direct this to Jill. First of all, it's kind of funny that you were talking about the leakage into the Intervale Elmwood area from the dry cleaner. That Brian actually worked it into a joke that our coughing or whatever that might result from this. So my question is, my understanding is that we only know about this because a guy bought a house on Elmwood and had the air tested, not the soil, the air. And it was in the air that they found these suspected carcinogens. So my question is, dry cleaning, or at least this particular dry cleaner, beginning around 1949, which would make it 7 or 8 decades now, that this stuff has leached into the ground. And I haven't heard either reported, it wasn't in your report, I'm not blaming you. What do we know really about how far from the epicenter this stuff has gone? I mean, if it made it into the air, and we know it's in the soil, what's the half-life of it? What does anyone, I mean, real scientists, not the EPA, I mean, none of us at this point are really trusting anyone from the EPA. So how is it that we're measuring where this stuff has gone? You said it's in the north end of Elmwood. Have they done a kind of perimeter that they can tell us how much is in there, what's the half-life, and what's the, there is no accepted, but what's a healthy to unhealthy spectrum of, of equivalent?
Sure. So the EPA is still doing the testing around the impact zone. So they started out with a larger circle and have been working in based on test results. What we don't know yet is the exact source of the contaminant. So, obviously we're like, well, this typically uses, dry cleaners use this. There's a dry cleaner there right now. There actually was a dry cleaning facility further south on Elmwood as well. And these types of chemicals have been used in machine shops, and there is an old machine shop on Elmwood as well. So we don't know for sure yet. We will know soon which business or building is responsible for that. The handouts that I have that I can get to you do show the initial impact zone that they started working from and how they've been working down with the test results from that first round that show what are the health safety levels that the Department of Health uses and what the results came back as, so you can see them lined up together. So I'd be happy to get that to you.
Any other questions? We're running a little behind, but it is raffle time. Where is Amanda? Oh, good. Raffle.
It's raffle time.
Yeah, you have like 30 seconds.
Who's gonna win the raffle? I don't know. It's gonna be Ryan Doyle. Yay! It's Ryan Doyle.
Yeah, he's over there. He's right
there he is! Ryan Doyle wins! It means you have to come back.
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for staying for
Thank you.
this part of the meeting. And we hope you stay the whole meeting. But,
Well, it's going to get more and more interesting as we go on. Because next up is Emma Schoenberg, and she is going to do a recap of the last meeting, because we forget what we do from meeting to meeting, and it's important.
Hi, everybody.
10 minutes, dear.
I have 10 minutes, which is so all that I need. So for people that were here for the June meeting, we changed up our format a little bit. You know, we have this set of steering committee members. People can request proposals for what would like to be presented here at the NPA to the rest of the community. And then after those proposals are pretty much done and vetted, there's time in the agenda for us to introduce our city councilors, talk about local issues, and decide as a community what we want to be working on. And recently, the steering committee started thinking about more ways in which we can start incorporating the feedback and ideas of the people that give up their evenings to be part of this community and part of this decision-making process. So back in June, before the break, we held a little bit of a idea gathering brainstorm, call it a visioning exercise, if you will. And we asked questions like, if the NPA had more money at its disposal, what would you want to do with it? What are the things that you want to see at this NPA, and what would you like to talk about? Because your time is really valuable, and we want these meetings to have a lot of value for you, and to also be a place where actual direct democracy can take place, because this is a special venue in which we can interact with our city councilors and with the planning processes from the city, and make this just a really impactful place to come together and talk about what we want to see. So we have some feedback to recap. The things that we wanted to see in broad themes were talking about issues like affordable housing in the Old North End in Ward 2 and Ward 3. People mentioned our mental health as a concern for our residents and our neighbors. We also had really kind of physical questions about how we can improve recycling, cleanliness on our downtown streets, and how we can start engaging our neighbors that might not be present at these meetings already, so that this, again, can be a really diverse and representative group of people. We came up with ideas about how we can change this NPA itself, especially if we had something like more money from the city or from city councilors' discretionary budgets. And if you have interest in that side of it, the financing the NPAs more, please reach out to Jim Lockridge, who's been heading this up as a personal project. And we had conversations about parklets and subsidizing more recycling initiatives in this area, and a lot of different ways in which this NPA can start talking about the issues that are impacting us on a daily basis. I can say personally, after that NPA, a lot of folks came up to me afterwards and was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to see this meeting. So that was really encouraging to get that feedback from the crowd. So I'm just going to keep opening that up. You know, I think at this point, the steering committee members, I am one of them, Lizzie Haskell over here, Jen, Tony, Amanda, Andy. Feel free to come up to us and start talking to us about what you want to see this meeting being, because it can be more than just information dissemination. This can also be a decision-making body, as you know from the times that we've decided to pass resolutions, and we're always looking for ideas. So the kind of recap or the conclusion that we came out of it while looking at the big whiteboard that we created was the idea that we're going to start when the proposals come in, when we're looking to fill time in the agenda, when we know the community members that have expressed interest in being part of this NPA, thinking about creating broad themes for each of the NPA meetings. So taking all of that we learned from the community members, and of course increasing how much we're hearing from community members, and say having a meeting along the lines of housing. Just a little bit more structure so that these meetings actually create something that you want to go to and spend your evenings on, and hopefully draw more people in. So those broad themes could be something like housing. It can be something like mental health. It could be transportation. It could be, you know, the small changes that we want to see in our community, like parklets and more bike accessibility. And so we're going to just keep exploring that and keeping that in mind, and especially when the opportunities from the city, which people like Jim are really following really closely in his spare time, come for more money. That's a great idea. Like, we actually know what we would spend money on because we've been having this conversation the whole time. So this is a really special place to start airing those ideas and kind of shooting for the moon and incorporating a lot of those ideas that would make someone want to come to a meeting and make this a body of people that are passionate about their community and want to see it changing or improving and getting their ideas out there. Additionally, we also talked about actual changes that we could make to this space itself. And I think it makes a lot of sense that childcare was one of the first things we talked about. So that's going to be a priority for the NPA at this time, to start providing more consistent, reliable childcare. We had a volunteer at that last meeting who's actually not here, but that is a need that's been identified and would keep parents here later and able to participate. So childcare, and then also translators, so that the New American community and people who are recently in this community not speaking English can come to this meeting and still participate and see like that they have access to it, and maybe we'll learn a little bit about what we're not representing in this group currently. And not only that, but translators was identified as a way to access communities that aren't here already. So there was a note of proactively reaching into communities that we're not currently at. And then I think also the just value of the food and consistently having food. And you might remember, if you were at the June meeting, we spent a long time talking about what the budget was going to look like and how we can participate on the monetary level with the budget that we currently have. Again, with this idea that there could someday be more money for the NPAs. And so we decided at the last meeting to continue to fund this community dinner because it is incredibly valuable. And we also decided to, for the first time, give extra funds to the Old North End Ramble, which is a community event, block party, if you will. And we gave, I believe, $300 to the Ramble during that decision-making process, which was new for us. And we were able to have a presence at the Ramble as well. We were like, you know, our little logo was on the pamphlet, which was pretty cool. It's a good logo if you've never seen it. So those are some of the things that, you know, can come out of having a really productive conversation and being really open to new ideas, and also really addressing what the community wants. And kind of in that theme, I'm going to try something out. Who's paying attention? Cool. So one thing that was identified during our last steering committee meeting is that we have elections in November. And so our October meeting is going to be the meeting before those elections. And so the idea was tossed out in the steering committee that we invite, no idea if they're actually going to accept, but we invite people that are going to be on our ballot in November. So that's from governor's race to Senate race, all the way down to the local level. We don't have many contested elections here in Ward 2-3, thank goodness. And so, but we would like to ask the permission of the people here if people would be comfortable if we extended those invitations, not knowing if they come in, and just invite, just like anybody else who comes and does a presentation, just with a little bit more active solicitation to come and talk about the things that they might want your support on and what it means when you go and vote at the ballot in November. You'll have a chance to ask some questions and they'll be invited to participate. So particularly that's the governor's race. And again, this will be more opportunity for our city councilors and other representatives to talk about their views and vision for the year to come in the legislative section. So I'm just this is an experiment. You know, what we did in June was an experiment, and what we're doing right now is an experiment. I'm gonna just put it to a vote. If you would actively like us to ask people to be part of our NPA meeting who are gonna be on our ballot in November. That's the vote? Yes. And is anybody opposed?
Yeah, anybody opposed, really? Okay.
We talked about it.
It's just a few beats too late. It's okay.
Cool. Okay, so we're just going to send out those invites. Again, this is just kind of an exercise to participate in the decision making that the steering committee is doing. In November, you might see someone here giving a presentation just like anyone else does, to talking about the vote in November.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Any questions or comments for Emma? Albert.
I just really want to applaud you on child care and translators and access to other languages.
And that came from this room here, not from the
Thank you.
steering committee.
I noticed that Max Tracy has entered the room since, I don't know if you want to say a few words or not. City Councilor, Ward 2. Yeah, about 3 minutes.
So I think you've heard about a number of other issues. One thing that I did want to touch on that I don't think was talked about that was voted on our August 27th meeting was a change to the mall permitting process, or the way that the mall is allowed to be permitted. The development agreement that was approved by the council originally said that the funding had to be fully in place in terms of being able to start the foundation work. So basically, the developer had to have all the money in hand before starting that. What the vote was really to do on in the August meeting was to do a couple of different things. One was to have the city take over the streets work. So the idea was that originally that the streets that are getting built as part of this were going to be designed by the developer, and then we're going to be paid for with the tax increment financing money that the voters approved. The idea was that we would provide sort of the basic designs, and then that they would implement those designs. The change that the agreement put forward was that the city will take over that design work and that the money will pay for the city to do that design work. That was not something that I was opposed to or had a problem with. What I had an issue with was the changing of the funding structure, basically allowing them to decouple the foundation and the beginning of construction of the foundation from having full funding for the mall. So basically, what it allows them to do is to start building the foundation but not have all the money in hand to complete the development. And that, you might have noticed that there wasn't a lot of work going on over the summer, the prime development months. I think a lot of that had to do with not having money in hand. And so this was in not being able to move forward with that permitting, or with the foundation construction. What the council approved was allowing them basically to build the foundation basically up to that point without having full funding, and then have to draw another permit in order to be able to get the full building. Some people felt, the majority of the council felt that we'd be better off with a foundation in place that should he not be able to get full funding, he being Don Sinnix, the developer. I felt like to put my cards fully on the table, I think that this guy is really slimy. I don't trust him. I think I think that he's a liar. I don't know if I shouldn't say that, but I just think that he's really slimy. I think he's a very slimy person. I don't trust him. I think that if you talk to anybody who does development in the city, people who many of us probably might have agreed with or disagreed with on projects or whatever, they don't have a nice word to say about him. He doesn't have nice words to say about our contractors. He regularly trashes local contractors. I do not trust this person to execute this development. I think that we should hold him to the original agreement. That unfortunately is not going to take place. I think that this is a really concerning step, honestly, and I hope that we're able to, that in some way that he does what he says he's going to do, so that we're not left with an empty hole in the ground like other cities. I didn't support the project, but I don't also want an empty hole in the ground. But I just don't trust this person, and that's why I didn't want to do that. And I think we've bent over backwards enough for this particular developer, changing our zoning, getting all these bonds, all these things out there. So I think that we needed to hold the line on this. The council didn't do that. I was the only one to vote against it, and that's why. Yeah.
Right. If somehow Mr. Sinnix didn't make it through the project, would the project continue?
Andrew, you need a microphone. You can't be heard.
So the question was if Mr. Sinnix doesn't make it through, would the project continue? I think that we would have to do something. I mean, I don't know that it would continue in its current iteration. I think that they would have to basically go back to the drawing board. And that was the crux of the debate, was whether or not people felt we'd be better served by having a foundation in the ground or not. My feeling is that we wouldn't be better served by that, because that would be a particular footprint, that foundation would be designed to support a particular design. And so I felt like even if it falls through, that and even if it was a delay, that having an open site that was, not bound by this particular previous developer's feelings was going to be better off. So that's why.
I'm going to step out of the moderator's role to ask a question and make a comment. First of all, the kind of foundation that is going to be poured or started has to rely on piles, because they found out that the ground cannot support a 14-story building. So if it doesn't go through, maybe the foundation we can be one for a lower building or something else. I'm worried that pouring the foundation means we can't have a park, which rules out what would be a wonderful option for that space. My question, Max, and I thank you for your vote, is the vote was 2 weeks ago. He got permission to do the foundation. There's not much going. I have a front row seat. There's not much going on there. What's going on?
I don't honestly know. Maybe Director Lunderville can clarify if he has an idea. He's up next. This is our director of CEDO, and they're working closely with them, so maybe he has a better idea. I'm not sure. I thought that would be helpful. I'm guessing that they're still securing the funding needed to do the foundation and then move forward with that. But again, I'm not completely sure as to why it's still stalled.
Thank you. Yeah, Tony.
Tony Reddington, sort of a point of information. I learned this morning that the group of 50 people who made an agreement with this person, Sinex, which was certified by the state court, and then that agreement was ignored, and through some questionable actions by our city planning director, those of us who are in a contract with Mr. Sinex were not notified. As a result, we had to go to U.S. District Court to have our due process recognized and the ability to question the changes in that project that involve both parking, the number of residential units, which are absolutely not consistent with the agreement that we got authorized by state courts. So tomorrow at 2:30, which I just found out this morning, if you're not doing anything at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon, at the U.S. District Court, at the post office building in the north entrance on Elmwood, you can go, probably get there 10 minutes ahead to get through security and bring an ID, and you'll hear the hearing between 50 residents of Burlington. I think Barbara is one of those, and there's some others here that are also in that crew, where we will try to have our day in court against this shyster, out-of-town developer who is trying to take advantage of us and refuses to abide by the law and abide by good citizen practice.
If you come, the lawyer says you have to dress nice. So, okay. And there's also another case, by the way, before the Vermont Supreme Court on what? On the feasibility study that the council voted on to let this project go ahead initially. It's never released to the public, and so we're in court to try to get that feasibility study released. It may seem moot now, but given that he hasn't got the funding, there may be something relevant in that feasibility study that we never saw. So we hope that the Supreme Court will let us release it. Anything else, Max?
I'd just like to expand slightly on what Barbara said.
The mayor, as we're all aware, would not release that feasibility study before we voted on the referendum that allowed this project to go ahead. So it was already a crisis in transparency. It was a crisis in popular participation. My question is, and I don't know if anyone on City Council has seen that feasibility study, whether or not that feasibility study hinted at the fact that maybe Mr. Sinex was bluffing his way through this whole process, and much like a Paul Manafort or even a Mr. Trump, was hoping that the money would arrive somewhere down, that we would be painted into a corner, that it would just have to go ahead. Was there possibly anything in that feasibility study that hinted at that, and that's why the mayor wouldn't want us to see that?
I wouldn't characterize as to why the mayor doesn't. I don't know why the mayor necessarily doesn't want us to see that. We saw the feasibility study in the context of executive session, so I'm limited by state statute and law as to this, and I could actually be I would get in censured. I'm not censured, but I would get in. I can't release executive information or discuss that, Albert. I'm sorry. That's the purpose of this Supreme Court case. I think that it's a reasonable question as to, right now, if he's not able to raise the money that he needs, are investors seeing something in this project with regards to feasibility that, that we didn't know about or that wasn't necessarily present there? And I don't know. I think an interesting question, and I hope that we are able to, answer that. I think it should be released, honestly.
Along those lines, now as I understand it, the original agreement was that they couldn't pour the foundation until they had the funding, but they were allowed to demolish quite a big extensive amount of building and dig a big hole without the funding. How did the city agree to let them do that much? Because at least with the building there's tax revenue coming in, right? But now that the building's gone and there's a hole in the ground, there's no tax. So why did the city give them that much, even in the beginning?
I think that's a very legitimate question. I'm not totally sure as to why that was broken down that way. That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna call this part of the, unless you have something else to say, Max?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Please give her a mic.
Before things get way out ahead of us, per usual, can we make sure that nothing comes of those conversations with Walmart?
Yeah.
Nothing, not even close?
Yeah. So what Kate's referring to is that there's, in addition to the mall site, there's also the Macy's property, and there was some conversation around what to do with that, and that Mr. Sinix had said that he had engaged with Walmart, which and others. I mean, I think he hasn't made anything, but I completely agree.
He's willing to talk to them.
Right. And I think that their values are completely out of step with our community, so I certainly oppose that and would stand against that. I think that
Keeping the community informed to the extent possible.
that's a great point.
It's not easy.
Right, because like all of our attention in public process has been around the current site, and during the process that we were developing the current site, the Macy's property closed, and then Sinix acquired that as well, and that creates a whole other huge parcel that is yet to be decided, so we can't lose sight of that.
I am going to close this. Is there another question? I am going to close this down, Max, but I do have one more question. The demolition, I understand the construction now is supposed to be by John Ireland and Pizzagalli, and I don't know what the fight is, but the demolition, as far as I understand it, was done from a crew from Albany, Schenectady. I want to know how many Vermonters were employed. Where was all the employment we were promised? Or are they all were they all out-of-state workers? I don't think anybody inquired into that. Last question.
So I'm not sure of the percentage of Vermont workers. I know in the development agreement that there was, commitments around seeking Vermont construction workers and all of that. I know that there are issues regarding PC Construction, which is a local firm that's been contracted to do some of the development work. Neither PC nor Sinix will really let us know what's going on there, but clearly there's something going on there, And Cynics has, to multiple city councilors, badmouthed PC construction, saying, just at every turn trashing on local contractors. So it wouldn't surprise me if something changed with regards to that construction contract with PC. I hope that they can work it out such that Vermonters are employed.
Yeah.
But Mr. Cynics has been very, very down on Vermont contractors, which is shocking to me in a community that values local so much.
Right.
Why would you do that?
And given that he promised all this local employment.
Right. So I think that if that does end up happening, that's a complete bait and switch, and that will further erode my confidence in the project. I hope he's able to work it out. I think that he needs to work it out because that's what was sort of promised to us as a community. And to bring in out-of-state workers would be a real, would take away that economic benefit that was put forward with regards to the project.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Two more very important issues on the agenda, and it looks like we're going to be able to end on time, but now I'd like Neil Lunderville to come forward from CEDO, who's going to talk about public engagement.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Neil Underville. I am the interim director of CEDO. Here today to talk about Memorial Auditorium, which we are engaged in a pretty robust public engagement process. I've been at CEDO for a few months now, and before that I had been working for the city for over 4 years. Spent 4 years it was my honor to spend 4 years as the general manager of the Burlington Electric Department, our great municipal utility in the city. And coming over to CEDO has been a very interesting development for me. There's a lot of other parts of the city that I hadn't experienced yet. And one of the big parts, of course, is what do we do with our amazing public buildings that have fallen into disrepair? So in addition to Memorial, we're also looking at the Moran plant. But tonight I want to talk about Memorial. Memorial is, everybody's been there. It's an incredible old building. Built in 1927, opened in 1928, when architecture was still good. It's a really pretty building. It's a handsome building in its own way. That beautiful exposed brick that we see here in this room surrounding the building. I feel like it's a real anchor in the downtown core, an anchor that we ultimately want to support, that we need to support to keep our community strong, to make sure that we have a large public assembly space, and we want to make sure we support it being a publicly owned building, because publicly owned building does allow us to do a lot of things that selling it off or tearing it down or doing something else wouldn't. So this is a conversation that's been going on for a long time. It's been going on for certainly years, probably more like decades, about what we do with Memorial. And we come into this sort of in the conversation midstream. What our objective has been at CEDO is to make sure that we bring as many Burlingtonians as possible into the conversation. So we've done a number of things. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done, and then a little bit about what we're going to do and where we hope to go. So one thing we thought was really important was to make sure that we first heard from the folks who'd already talked about this. And I know this has been a conversation here at other NPA meetings. I know that we as CEDO have also reached out to talk to a lot of people like Jim Lockridge who had inhabited that space and ran programs there for a long time to really understand what are the issues with that building and what needs to be fixed in order for it to be something more in the future. We got a lot of great feedback. We learned from that, of course I mentioned, it needs to be a publicly owned space, but it also needs to be modernized. I mean, this is a building that's in some pretty bad disrepair with water damage, but it's also one that doesn't have a working elevator. You can't load concerts into that very easily without an elevator. We need to close the street off and use a lot of people power to bring the heavy equipment in there. We also learned that it's not a particularly good acoustic space. Well, for a place that does a lot of music, whether it's downstairs or upstairs, it needs to be better. So we heard a lot of that feedback. We heard other feedback, but we said, let's go out and try to get more feedback from a very broad set of Burlingtonians. One way we did that was to do a citywide survey. We sent a direct mail postcard to every home with a link to a website, every home and business in Burlington with a link to a website. That survey, we had an outstanding response. We had that survey administered by an outside group who does this. Nearly 2,600 people filled out the survey. Most of them did it online. We did offer the survey in paper form. We had about 100 of those back. We were able to translate it for folks who needed it translated. We got some of those back as well. But 2,600 people in a city of our size represents a massive sampling. When other folks go out to do surveys at a state level, they're happy with 600 folks, and they say 600 is representative. At a national level, they'll do a survey and get 1,000 people and say, this is representative of the national opinion. We got 2,600. How many folks here took the survey? That's awesome. That's great. And you are engaged, and I'm excited and not surprised to see that. We took those results and we analyzed them, and what we found, again, not totally surprising, but very encouraging. Number one is that Memorial is well supported in this community. Folks want to see that building rehabilitated, renovated, and made sustainable for the future. That's one. Two is they're willing to pay for it, which is, in a time where folks are struggling to make ends meet, and we have a lot of competing interest on our pocketbooks. They said, for a number of different levels, we're willing to pay. And importantly, even at the highest level, which is about $110 a month, which would equate to about a $25 million general obligation bond, 73% of Burlingtonians said, we're willing to pay that. Now, that's important because for general obligation bond, if we're able to do anything going forward, we need 66% of the vote. It needs a supermajority. In the past, we've had ballot items go on Memorial that got over 50%, but didn't get to 66%. So having 73% say early on, without even seeing any specific plans, that they're willing to invest in this building gives me heart that there's a future. The future that they want, they told us about that as well. And they said that there are a number of uses that make sense there. Some of these are what has made sense in the building for the last 90 years. And some of them I think are new combinations. What we learned is, number one, shows and entertainment. I mean, people go to Memorial to see a show. I mean, if you think back over the years, all the great shows that have been there, I think everybody's been there to see one show. And it's a very unique venue, whether you're downstairs at the 242 or upstairs in the main venue, that's a pretty important spot. It's also a really important civic meeting place. It's a large building. In fact, I've been told, and I haven't been able to verify this, but it's the largest capacity building in the state of Vermont. It can hold, with the fire marshal looking the other way, it can hold about 2,600 people. That's a big space. That's a space where you have 2,600 people, that's the number of people who took the survey, just coincidentally. So that's a lot of people in that space. That's our community living room where we're able to have really big meetings. Folks said they want to see a farmer's market in there. A farmer's market's been done before. It's a great idea, especially in the winter months. We're able to have everybody in one place. They said arts and crafts are important. Youth music, certainly for many years with 242 there. That's been itself a cornerstone of Memorial. They said music-led programs and musician space. Those were the 7 top choices that over 50% of the respondents said were a good idea. So we took those survey results. We presented them in mid-August, Contois, and a week after that we held our first public workshop. The idea behind that public workshop was to start to turn these very big picture ideas into some more narrow combinations of ideas. Put another way, where the puzzle pieces fit together. Okay, I know, I can go on. I love this topic. This is exciting. Okay, but I'll keep moving it. So what we did here out of that is that folks, by and large, feel like there is a combination of elements that is going to make Memorial work for the future. It is obviously a big civic event space with an arts and entertainment venue in that first floor. I mean, on the main floor. Downstairs, folks definitely want to see a farmer's market, but they also want to make sure that it's flexible space, so that if there's music that goes in there, or if there's maybe rehearsal space or dances that can happen, that first floor, that basement floor is flexible. They want to make sure the acoustics work, and they want to make sure that we have some interesting uses for the other spaces. You know, most of us know Memorial for the main space and the place downstairs, but there's a lot of nooks and crannies in Memorial that can be used for really interesting, I think, really interesting community spaces, like galleries or dance studios, excuse me, dance studios or other unique spaces that we can use from time to time. I think really importantly, folks said, we don't want to spend 25 million or 20 million once and let this building fall back into disrepair. It's really important that when we do this, we do it right. Well, not only do we spend the money to fix the building right, but we put a fund in place so that we can sustain it for the long term. So we don't get back to where we are today with the building closed and parts of the roof falling in. So what's next? One thing we think is important is seeing the building. Folks asked for this. So we're going to lead public tours of Memorial on September 25th. Notice will go out next week. Thank you. Notice will go out next week for that. It'll be between 4 and 6:30. We're going to do waves of tours. There'll be guided tours. Wear closed-toed shoes. You have to sign a waiver because there's some issues in there. And we'll bring the hard hats. And it should be great because then you can really visualize how these spaces fit together. Following up on that, in early October, on October 11th, we will have a second workshop where we're actually going to present some of these sketches of how it could fit together. What we hope to get out of that workshop is a good sense of where the community wants to go. What combination of things makes sense?
1 more minute, okay?
Yeah, no, that was it. And what I really want to encourage you tonight, so one, I want to give you a little update. 2, I want to encourage you to come out and be part of that process. Please do that. It's really important that we are together, getting our voices together and moving us toward the March ballot, which is what we're trying to, so we're on a bit of a timeline with this. So we're trying to get the feedback in a way where we can make it an action plan, operationalize that feedback, and move forward. So
Thank
with
you
that,
very much.
you're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Any quick questions? Okay, Albert, quickly.
Yes, I was at that meeting and the results were
And they were the results were as surprising as you found them. I thought where the debate broke down was in the ways in which people suggested that Memorial be used. And so on one end of the spectrum, you had people arguing for a process by which white male startups would dominate the inside. On the other end, 36% of the people said they would like a community kitchen inside Memorial Auditorium, much like we have in the morning at the food shelf.
We get
all done, thank you. But
I want to note that in our community workshop, after the results were presented, there wasn't a lot of talk of incubators, but there was a lot of talk about community kitchens. So we'll continue to hear that at the next workshop.
Thanks for raising the point out, and thank you for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Okay, last but very much not least,
I just
Amanda?
wanted just one quick follow-up on Memorial Auditorium. The presentation for that was presented at one of the meetings is here, and we printed out a few of them. So if you're here and there's one on the table and you would like it, feel free to take it home with you.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, last but very, very much not least, a topic near and dear to my heart is keeping City Hall Park green, and to present people who have done tremendous work on this issue, Donna Kenny Walters and Monique Fordham.
Hi, I'm Donna Walters. So tonight we have about 10 minutes, and what we'd like to do in that 10 minutes is read the ballot language that is on the petition that we're trying to collect signatures to get on the ballot. And then I would like to present some information that's on the flyer that everybody received. And I don't know if you want to have a question and answer period after that. And then we'd like to ask for a vote and ask for your endorsement to get this item on the ballot. So I'm going to start.
Donna, there might be a vote to warn it for next time. They might want to vote on it, or they might want a vote to warn it for the next meeting.
Okay.
It's up to them.
Okay. So let me start by reading what the ballot language is, and it's on the top of the petition, the signature petition sheet. It says, we, the undersigned voters of the City of Burlington, hereby petition our City Council to warn the advisory resolution below for a town meeting vote. Whereas City Hall Park needs work, but the city's current redevelopment plan removes approximately 40% of the trees and increases paved area to cover about a third of the park at an estimated cost of $4 million, shall we, the citizens of Burlington, advise the mayor and city council to A, cancel the current plan for City Hall Park that was approved by the city council on 6/25/18, and instead repair, maintain, and improve the park by preserving more existing trees and shaded areas, repairing grass and existing walkways, increasing lighting and benches, and retaining the historic character of the park. So we need 1,900 signatures to get this on the ballot. We'd love to get it on for the November ballot, but that would mean we have until next Thursday, September 20th, to get 1,900 signatures. And that's one of the reasons why we've handed out one of these petition signature sheets to each of you. And on the very bottom of it is the name and address where you can return the sheet, and the telephone number, and also a place, our website, www.keeptheparkgreen, where you can print out more signature sheets if you need them. So now I want to go over what you have on your flyer. This here is what you have on your flyer. So essentially the top part is a picture of all the trees that were in the park last summer. There were 58 trees there. Since then, 7 trees have been removed. 2 blew down in a windstorm last October, and the city removed 5 that were in hazardous condition last spring. And they still plan to cut down 21 more trees next spring. This is already approved. It will happen unless we do something to cancel it. So the bottom 2 diagrams are a picture of the configuration of the current hardscape before, and the increase to a third of the park, the increase in the amount of paved area. And I'd like to call attention to the really large triangle, which is, it's out the back door of Burlington City Arts and RERAS. There's a big triangle of grass there. And all of these trees need to be cut down because they want to pave that. They want to pave that area to make increased space for the artist market, for vendors. And the decision has been made, I'm not sure who made it, but after the construction, they have decided that the farmers market would no longer be in the interior of the park. It would be moved to the outside perimeter in the streets, like it is on St. Paul and College Street, and there will be a wider sidewalk on Main Street. So all the vendors would set up on the outside edge, and people will be able to walk and go on the interior, but the vendors won't be setting up there anymore like they currently do. So, so we're wondering why pave this whole area and have to cut down all of these trees to make room for the artists market. And also you can clearly see the trees on the paths. So there's 2 paths that will be moved down and widened, and that is to increase the foot traffic. And because they're slightly moving those paths, they have to cut a bunch of trees that are in the way. So we just feel like that there could be a plan to repair and improve the park that just keeps the walkways where they currently are. And then we wouldn't have to cut down all those trees. And it would cost a lot less than $4 million. So not sure where you want to go with this now, Barbara. That's essentially our presentation, and I don't know how you want to handle the endorsement.
Well, let's see if there are any questions or comments. I have a question. Well, yes?
I assume, can you speak about the fountain? Apparently the old fountain disappears in the new plan. In the new plan, there will, the historic fountain will be removed and it will be replaced with a jet splash pad.
James, I'd like to ask you a question. I know you wanted this warned to next meeting, but if next meeting is all politics, then there might not be a chance to vote on it. So I would like to ask the body, do you feel ready to vote on this resolution, to suggest this to the City Council now, or do you think it's better to wait till next month? Okay. We won the language in the agenda, so it's okay to vote on it now. Is there any more discussion before I call for a vote? Yes, Joy.
I just want to applaud you for all the incredible hard work you've done. It's been grueling with all the meetings and behind the scenes work. So first of all, thank you for that. And I think this is a very reasonable resolution. It's not asking for anything other than let's take a pause. There has been a lot of concern that have been voiced, and instead of just literally steamrolling ahead, it would be good to just take pause. So I want to support this resolution. I think it is very sensible, and if we choose in the future to do some more work to the park, we can do it, but we can do it with more transparency and public engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. I would like somebody to put the motion on the floor. Jim, is there a question, or are you putting the motion?
Okay, so the motion would be to request that the City Council spend no more money getting the final design, because they're going to, I think they've already approved spending $300,000 more to finalize the design, get all the little details. And so say, put a pause on that until after the vote.
Okay,
and that we endorse.
This is a different motion than
no,
theirs.
this would be as part of it. That we endorse the petition and that we request the City Council to pause any further funding. Does that sound reasonable? Because why spend money?
Donna, how do you feel about it?
I checked with the city attorney last week, and there has been signed contracts for over $700,000 of design fees, of which half has already been paid out. So I think it makes sense to put a pause on any more design work that hasn't already been done pending the vote.
Okay. So
I concur.
Consider that a friendly amendment.
I concur.
Is somebody writing, Jimmy, you putting that in writing, and would you give it to somebody who's going to carry it forward? Okay, so do people understand that in your agenda you have the motion that, you have Jimmy's motion to put that language that's in your agenda before the City Council, number one, and he added something about discontinuing future funding until a vote is had.
To pause the design work, so no, the design work is already under contract, but it's not all completed yet. So to pause the design work that is contracted for.
Okay, does everybody understand Jimmy's motion? Is there a second? Okay, there are Charlie and Tony and Janet all seconded. Okay, question, Janet.
My question is, how does this amendment relate to the already existing proposed statement? In other words, some people have already
You want to say something?
I don't know if it's deadline passed or the phrasing or the ballot. I'm guessing Jimmy knows that kind of thing before you spoke.
You need a microphone, hon. I can't.
So her question is,
Okay. Should I say it again?
Yeah, repeat her question if you would. Thanks.
So my question is relating to the amendment. I'm thinking Jimmy already knows this or he wouldn't have spoken up, but my question is what the new part of what the amendment means in relationship to the original proposed statement? In other words, some people have already signed the petition with the old statement. How does this relate to getting it on the ballot, if at all?
That's a good question. Actually, I really think these two questions should be separate. Okay, so so right now the amendment on the floor is the first part, Jim, and then you can make that separate motion after that. So right now you're voting on yes or no. The motion made by Jimmy Lee, seconded by Tony Reddington and others. The language in your agendas. So, no other discussion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Hearing no opposed, the motion carries. Now, Jimmy, do you want to make the second motion, please? And then, Monique, I'll ask you to speak to it, okay?
The request that the City Council pause further funding, further expenditure, or request, even if contracts are signed, request a pause until after the ballot item is voted.
Okay, is that voted on by the council or voted on by the public?
Voted on by the public.
Okay, and is there a second for that? Charlie Messing seconds it. I'm going to ask Monique Fordham to speak to it or against it.
I was just thinking about the implications of what we're saying when we're talking about freezing the design work that they're already under contract for. I think that there would be a supposition that if this were to pass, and let's hope that it does, if we can even get the councilors to actually, put it out for a vote, that even though that their funding has been paused, that doesn't mean that their funding couldn't be applied for additional work somewhere else as part of the Great Streets Initiative, or some other aspect of, the work being done in the park that may have to do with stormwater adjustments or something like that. So I don't think we really know fully whether or not the design is just about the aesthetics. They talked a lot about how they were doing, the design work for this new system that's supposed to deal with the stormwater, which I might add is just going to be exacerbated by cutting down all the mature trees that actually hold stormwater. But anyway, so the idea is they still could do things with the money that they are entitled to as part of their contract. In other words, the contract wouldn't have to be broken and the city wouldn't have to pay a penalty by paying the amount that they had promised. That work could be, creatively readjusted to support some of the other aspects at the park that are, needed, like I said, stormwater and things like that. So I just wanted to say
So
that.
are you speaking for this or against it, or?
Well, I'm not able to vote.
Okay.
I don't think it could hurt to articulate that there's an idea that the funding should stop, because of course, what you see in litigation and like in environmental stuff, it's all about segmentation, and then when enough money's been spent, they go to the judge and say, oh, judge, but we've spent so much money already. And the judge says, yeah, it'd be really impractical to stop this thing since they spent so much money. So the idea of talking about having the funds frozen until after the vote, and if the vote, is in favor of having a redesign or a whole new reopening or re-examination of the issue and trying to do regular maintenance, they can help use that money to design that. Believe me, I'm sure they can come up with something to do.
Okay, thank you, Monique. We have 1 minute to end this meeting on time, so I'm wondering if you're ready to vote on this. Okay, this is the second motion, which asks for a halt in funding the contract until after the voters have had a chance to weigh in. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Nay. Okay, I see two. Do we need, okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Somebody do the counting for me. 1, 2, 3, 7. My eyes are 4, but I see 7. All those opposed? 1, 2. I see 2 opposed. There's 3 opposed. Okay, so the motion carries. Thank you very much. If there is no objection, I will adjourn the meeting. Yes, Janet.
I'm just looking for 1 or 2 people after the meeting to go across the road and get a couple of, some stuff on my car that
Okay, are there people who will volunteer to help Janet bring some things in? Amanda, how many people do you need, you think? Okay, you've got them. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much. It was a great meeting. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying.
Before everyone leaves, please stay to help put away all these tables and chairs. They go in the appropriate spaces that Jim is putting in right now. This is a lot of work for volunteers, so without help, it's going to be